Here with Brad Shelton, assistant, Tonganoxie High School, ABCA Assistant Coach of the Year, but best season in school history, so runner-up state finish. So, Brad, thanks for jumping on with me.
No, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
I mean, what does it mean with getting this award?
Well, first of all, shock. I mean, but it did mean a lot to me. It was our head coach and our principal called me into the office, and I had no idea what was going on. And um, the team was in there, and yeah, it caught me by surprise. And then about a half hour later, the emotions hit that. Wow, that's pretty cool. So, um,
I mean, is
I
there
didn't see
some
it
some
coming. I didn't see it.
validation for a life of service? I mean, you've been 20 plus years, been a special ed teacher also. So, I mean, does that kind of validate a life of service?
Yeah, I guess I haven't really viewed it that way. It's just I almost feel believe it or not, kind of embarrassed because I normally I'm not a guy that likes a lot of attention. So but it was a humbling experience. I've had hundreds of people say, congratulations, well deserved. And sometimes I feel like, well, I know there's a lot of guys out there that deserve it, and probably more so than I do. But um, I, I have a lot of gratitude towards Coach Loomis and I believe McPherson High School, Kansas High School, their head coach actually had a part in it as well. So, it's humbling to think that people think that of you. And, I'm not going to give it back either. So,
And I do want to shine some light. I don't think a lot of people know like the hard work that goes in with our committees. You know, we have committees for every level of college and then high school. And Jimmy Harris runs our All American committee, but Heath Gershner, McPherson's coach, he's the Region Five divisional or All American committee member, and then Ryan McGinnis out of Wisconsin runs our Region 5 for the divisional, and then John Fitzpatrick's out of Iowa, and he does the Region 5 for the high school committee. And that's kind of how it works. You know, guys work their way up, and the All American committee is our best committee because guys get to come to Omaha, and those guys are in there banging away with everything. It's the All American teams, it's the Gold Glove Awards, but then it's the head coaches and the assistant coach awards as well. So those guys put a lot of time in for 12 months. So I appreciate all the hard work that the high school committees put in.
well, yeah, I appreciate it as well. And it's, I don't know all goes behind the scenes, but I do know that I wouldn't want that position. So, but I do respect the heck out of anybody that wants to be on there. And, I do appreciate the honor, and it's very humbling, like I said.
You know, best season in school history, 20-4, and then you guys lost to McPherson the second game of the doubleheader. You know, just walk us through the season a little bit.
Well, going into the season, we honestly thought we knew we had some good returning players, and we knew we probably had the best 4A player in the state, which he was awarded the co 4A player of the year. So we knew we were going to have some success. But I'd be lying to you if I said we thought we were going to have that kind of success. And I can just tell you, it goes back, it goes to the kids, it goes to the seniors we had on the team last year. They really bought into our message. They worked hard. It was one of those teams that if Coach and I, he made the comment several times, we probably wouldn't even have to show up, and they'd be in our routine, and they'd be leading practice, and they wouldn't miss a beat. So I give most of the credit to them. Because of their work ethic. They bought into being team players, playing for each other, and they just didn't want to lose. They refused to go down, and we finally met a buzzsaw in McPherson. But man, it was a fun ride, and yeah, it was the best season in school history, and would have been fun to end it on another win. But it was we met a good team, and we lost fair and square. So
What's your guys' student population there?
it is 680, I believe.
Okay, so I mean that's a medium range school. And
Yeah, and we do play most of the teams we play throughout the regular season are bigger schools, and coach schedules that way on purpose, to kind of put our players to the test. And we preach about not playing. It's not the team we're playing the game of baseball, 21 outs, one pitch at a time. And some teams buy into that, some don't. But last year's team bought into that, and they didn't get intimidated by anybody, and they felt they belonged every time out. And I believe that was a big key to our success.
do you have any JV responsibilities?
I do not, yeah, just in practice. I work with them a little bit, sometimes based on the needs, but I'm mostly involved with the varsity.
You have JV and varsity going at the same time?
Yes, they are usually on the road when we're at home. Yeah, we split, but we usually practice together if we can, and that way they're getting the same message that our varsity players are.
I mean, you've been there a long time. Have you ever thought about leaving there, or is that home for you?
Well, it's home for me. Unfortunately, I will tell you this: I've got two grandkids on the way, and I had to break the news to Coach Loomis just a couple months ago that I'm actually resigning from baseball.
Yep. What
Um,
what age are they?
well, one was just born 3 days ago,
Okay.
and one will be born in March. My wife's also a travel nurse, so during the baseball season, we don't see a lot of each other, and felt it was time to kind of back off a little bit. It wasn't an easy decision; it was a very emotional decision for me. And when I told Coach, I had to fight the tears back, but he understood. But it's something I'm going to miss once the season starts for sure.
You can always come back if you need to. I mean, you may not want to, but you
Yeah,
can
I can
always
I
head
can always
back.
Brett Favre it, I
Yeah,
guess,
if you miss it, you
back
can
and
always
forth.
head back. I mean, how much has it changed for you over the 20 years since you've been coaching?
I think the way it's changed is the fact that the kids kind of do their own thing in the summers now. It used to be where we try to organize it and play other league schools or play Legion ball, this and that. But the kids, we found that if they go, off and find a real competitive team to play for in the summertime, that they actually get a higher level of experience doing that. And as long as they're treating it, as getting better and working on the fundamentals of the game, that we try to tell them that sometimes you might find something, you might learn something that we haven't taught you and bring it back. So I think that's a positive thing too. And some of them have. Some of them have brought some things back that have helped them be more successful than what we were teaching. So we always tell them there's more than one way to skin a cat. So I think that's the biggest way it's changed, that we got kids that are going and playing for other teams and probably playing at a higher level than what we could put together ourselves.
Who do they usually go out where you guys are at located? Who are
In
some
the
of the
Kansas
Kansas
City
City?
area. Yeah, most of them play with Kansas City Metro teams.
You've been in the classroom for a while. I mean, what drew you to special education? That's a calling for sure. So, what drew you to special education?
Oh, I started teaching physical education, health, and strength and conditioning, and I actually got out of education after about 9 years of that, um, and found out in the private sector wasn't the grass wasn't quite as green as I thought it was going to be. Had an opportunity to get back into teaching, but I would have had to get my master's to go into special education. And the principal at the time that was recruiting me, he talked me into it, and I'm glad I did it. I've actually enjoyed it. I actually enjoy working with the kids, and my coaching responsibilities have shifted because I used to coach a lot of basketball and football, and now it's just been strictly baseball for the last several years. But it's been enjoyable to be able to focus on one sport and kind of put my time and effort and energy in the hallways into our baseball players and letting them, building those relationships in the hallways, and not, because before I wasn't able to see them in the fall and winter because I was coaching other athletes. So that's been a big change for me as well.
I mean, what was eye opening for you going out into the real world away from education that wanted to bring you back?
That every job has challenges.
Yeah,
I thought, man, getting out of teaching, I'm going into the private sector. I won't have to deal with certain things, and but yeah, every job has its challenges. I found out, and I also found out I missed being around teenagers.
it keeps you young, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, to a certain degree. Sometimes you get a few gray hairs, but I wouldn't trade it. And things like this award, when it was presented to me, I mean, that's what hit me. When I got a little emotional about an hour after, I was just sitting in my office thinking, wow. I mean, sometimes you get grumpy being around kids and parents and things like that. But when things like that happen and your team's in there and patting you on the back and giving you hugs, it's like, what is there to be grumpy about? I mean, that was probably the highlight of my career, honestly.
What's changed about being an educator?
Um, well, cell phones. I'll be honest
Yeah,
with you. Cell phones is
yeah.
probably the biggest challenge. The biggest thing is because you have to worry more about liability. You have to worry about now the big thing, kids are airdropping, and sometimes it's not appropriate for
Yep.
school. So and then just the distraction of it. So I would say by far and away that's the biggest thing that's changed.
Do you have no cell
I don't
phones in
think.
the classroom?
Yes, we do. We obviously we have a rule that when the teacher asks you to put them away, put it away. But there's always going to be those that challenge that rule, and having to constantly remind that, and then if you do have to ask for it to put it away, if a kid violates the rules and you have to ask them for it, sometimes that can become an issue. They don't want to give it up. So yeah, we didn't have to deal with that 20, 25 years ago. So
Yeah, I
that's
don't.
kind of
But
added to the
the
workload.
toothpaste isn't going back in the tube though, and that's the hard part with that age group is you can try to educate as best you can and how the smartphone interacts with your brain, but they're still teenagers, so they're still going to do what they want.
That's absolutely true. I remember being that age and people telling me certain things, and I remember thinking, "Ah, you're old. You don't know what you're talking about."
Exactly.
So I'm sure that's what's going through their head now too.
Were you going to coach? Getting into education, did you know you were going to coach?
Yeah, that's the main reason I got into education is because I wanted to coach. I was very active in athletics as a high schooler, and not that I was that great, but I was active and loved it. So I always knew I wanted to coach. So yeah, that's kind of what led me to teaching.
So, I mean, coaches growing up, who impacted you the most to the coaches that you had along the way?
Well, I can say Greg Tanzer. He was my middle school basketball coach. He now lives in Bennington, Kansas. I just chatted with him a while back. He was a great junior high coach, taught me the fundamentals of the game. And then my high school coach, Clark Coco, um, he used to be a former coach at Fort Wayne State in Nebraska, and then he was most recently the dean of education at Washburn Tech. But the man knew how to motivate, uh, knew how to teach defense. That's what probably helped me more as a coach than anything, because before I had him as a coach, I was more offensive minded. By far, I love to shoot the basketball. He taught me that you had to play defense if you wanted to get on the floor. So, and then as I coached out of college, I coached with a man by the name of Kevin Muff. He played at Kansas State University and coached at Pitt State. He was the head men's coach there for a while, but he basically just brought all of what I had learned prior to together, um, and started teaching me more of the ins and outs as far as strategy, offensively, actions, and how to make people harder to guard, things like that. So those are probably the three that were most influential. But I will say, um, coaching with Coach Lomas in baseball, uh, I and I'm not just saying this because I'm on here and he helped me get this award, but he could step into Division I ranks at any time, not a doubt in my mind. The guy knows baseball inside and out. He knows kids inside and out. And I can tell you that this team we had this year, there's a lot of other coaches that wouldn't have won 19 games with him. Uh, so I just wanted to throw that out there. He's a great guy, great coach, and he's definitely had a big influence on me as well.
How many multi-sport guys do you have?
We have, I would say, well over 60 to 70% of our
So
kids are,
everybody's playing
yeah,
everything.
well over half. Most of them either play basketball, football, or wrestling.
When can you
And
start working with them in Kansas?
we can do like conditioning, off season conditioning with them, pretty much at any point. And we usually don't gear that up till after Thanksgiving. We start doing some conditioning, bringing them in like 2 or 3 times a week, and more
How
so
much
than you can.
basketball conditioning are you doing with the baseball guys?
Not much. It's mostly core. It's mostly leg and core work.
My dad was a
Forearm.
basketball
Yeah.
guy. My dad wanted to be a basketball coach. He didn't want to be a baseball coach. So some of our conditioning came straight out of a basketball practice. So we would run
You want a wedge
suicides. We would
differential.
run 17s or organs. Like we did all of it, which not sure if it was effective from a mental standpoint because we
Yeah.
had to push through things. But it's nice to hear that things have changed.
Well, the main reason we tell them conditioning, but it's mainly to get them together and start building
Yeah.
some team unity. But yeah, we mainly focus on legs, core strength, stuff like that, and we don't kill them. Like I said, mainly it's to get them together and start building some unity. And then on Fridays we implemented a thing where we have coffee with the coaches. We bring them in at 7:15 in the morning, and just to get them together. And we bring in donuts and have some coffee, and just to kind of build those relationships. And that's another small thing that I think probably has helped our program as well.
What are some of the things you guys are talking about on those Friday mornings?
Life, like a lot of the kids usually gear the conversation with what they've seen on TikTok or what somebody said online and in on Twitter or whatever. But we do talk a lot of baseball too. Like the kids like to talk a lot of smack to each other. So those are the times when the coaches kind of they see us outside of the lines, the intensity that we have in practice, and we get to joke around with them. But it's usually a bunch of nonsense.
How do you help them sift through that nonsense? Because there's so much of it out there. How do you help them sift through what they're seeing on their phone?
Well, we do. We talk about it quite a bit. About we are very, very big about whether it's on the field or whether it's on online. We tell our kids we don't want to be known as a program that runs their mouth. I mean, honestly, to be quite frank, that probably helped me in receiving this award because I don't think I would have been very well thought of if we did put a team out on the field that ran their mouths and things like that. So our kids are pretty aware of how we feel about getting online and talking trash to, whether it be opponents or whether it be on the field. So I think they probably like to get it out when they're on these Friday morning meetings. So because they know that coach is not afraid to, set them out if they're doing something that's going to be a detriment to our team unity. So
Hey, how do the Kansas playoffs work? So does everybody get in, and then how's it go? How's the format go from there?
yeah, it used to be we had sub states, that were broken up into certain different, but now they seed it East versus West. We have 32 teams in our class, and they seed it 1 through 16 in the East and 1 through 16 in the West. And then you play it that way. And if you get to the championship,
So you're playing the West versus the East is championship game.
yeah, no, actually, they'll meet. It's the top four in the West play the top four in the East.
Okay.
They all go to state, so you have
Yep.
eight teams go to state.
Where's that hosted at?
It's in Salina. It's called Dean Evans Stadium in Salina. That's where it's at every year, and real nice facility. They just got all turf here a couple of years ago, and the last time we played there in 2018, it wasn't. We had a big rainstorm and had to suspend it, and then moved down to Wichita to finish it up. But it's an outstanding facility, nice central location in the state of Kansas.
Did you guys go in the day before?
We did. Yeah.
Is that
I
the
tell you,
first hotel trip for your guys?
No, we took one to Fort Scott, Kansas, to a tournament down there. That's one of the places that's where we got I think two of our losses early on. We played a really good team or two down there, and coach did that on purpose because for two reasons. He wants to see that tougher competition, but also he made the comment when he said, we're going to go down to Daylor and we're going to stay overnight because we want them to be able to get used to that before state. So he was already envisioning that we were going to make a run at the end of the year. And so we got him down there and got him to stay overnight in a hotel and kind of taught him what the expectations were in case it happened again. And it did. So
What do you feel like kind of separated this year's team having success maybe in some years past didn't have the type of success?
our senior class, I can say that I give most of the credit to them. We obviously had some younger kids that did some great things, but the work ethic of our seniors, the staying after practice, getting extra reps in the team huddles, the kind of being on each other and holding each other accountable in the hallways, in the classrooms. We had a couple seniors in particular that um, they wouldn't come rat anybody out to us, but we knew that things were getting taken care of that needed to be taken care of. And if they saw something they thought was going to throw us off course, they had no problem kind of getting kids back in line. And, I give most, if not all, the credit to that senior class.
And that's a huge one for a successful team, isn't it? Where it's player led on accountability.
Yeah.
Especially for the high school kids. They're in their own peer group, and high school kids aren't always going to want to step out of their shell. But if you have a couple that are willing to do that, it sets up to be really good.
Yeah, and I can tell you, it's not just baseball. I've coached football and basketball as well, and some of the best teams I've ever coached is you can pretty much think back and look like what was the leadership qualities of your senior class, and there's a direct correlation.
What are you bringing from those other sports onto the baseball field?
Well, this past year's team had more football players that had some success in the football on the football field. So I think that brought some grit, a little more grit to our team. That we're gonna go out there and battle. But we also one of our top players last year was also a state championship wrestler, and he helped a great deal in coming out. He didn't come out as a junior, came out as a senior, and I think because he won the state championship in wrestling, he came out with a carefree attitude that I've kind of already done my thing, and now I'm just going to play free. And he even told us that, and he did, and he had a whale of a season, and ended up getting injured in the semifinal game at state. I'm not going to say we would have beaten McPherson in the state championship game, but I do think it would have been a tighter ball game had he had been in there. He was our 3-hole hitter, and it was a tough loss for us. But I think those kinds of kids coming from football and wrestling that just have that fight to them and that grit, that helped us a bunch this year as well.
Do you have many guys going on and play at the next level?
We have one individual that is, well, actually two that are playing at Kansas City Community College. One of them, his dad is the head coach. Otherwise, he would probably be playing Division I baseball. I know that Kennesaw State and Wichita State were talking to him and offered him, but he wanted to go play for dad for a couple of years. And he's a kid that needs to put on some beef. And when
Junior
he does,
college is a great place for that.
Yep, and we think he's going to be playing in the Big 12 or something like that. So I mean, he's got a lot of ability. And then the other kid that plays there, he's a pitcher for us, and he was 7-0 last year. And so yeah, we have just two. The other kid went on to college to wrestle, so that was his love. So
what do you wish
we have some more coming though that I think that'll probably be playing college ball in a few years.
What do you wish you had known before you got into teaching and coaching?
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about the pay. I knew the pay wasn't going to be
Oh no.
I knew the pay wasn't going to be the greatest, but what I've learned in the last few years is your take-home percentage goes down every year because of the cost of insurance and just the cost of living and everything. So I didn't really think that through very well.
How is retirement for Kansas high school for teachers?
We do have a pension. It's called Capers, which will be nice once I get there. But obviously, I also have my own individual plan. But yeah, it's the teacher pay increases are not really happening right now in the state of Kansas anyway. So I won't grit you about that too much. But that's one thing I wish I had a better plan for when I was in my 20s and saved a little more back then.
What are you doing supplementing wise? Because I did the same thing kind of early on with supplementation. More was like Roth IRA for our kids' education and some other things. But if you put enough in, anybody listening in, if you're just getting going in this thing, if you can put even a small amount away in an extra place monthly, you're going to come out way ahead on the end.
Well, that's what I've told both of my kids. You may not think you can afford it, but if you start doing it now, you'll never miss it. So. And that's something I didn't do at their age, and I wish I would have. But I mow in the summertime. I have a few yards that I just do just to keep busy, but it also gives me a little bit of fun money. Last summer I mowed for the school district a little bit, but I think I'm going to go back to doing it on my own. I made a little more money that way. So, but yeah, that's the main thing I do. I like to get outside and just be in the outside environment.
I had a bunch of side hustles to try to make it work along the coaching journey. You can do it. I know it's tough. If you're listening in, I know it seems hard, but if there's a will, there's a way, and you can make it work. And if you, the main thing is living below your means, and I know that's really hard in this society, the microwave society that we're in. If you can live below your means, you're going to be in great shape at the end.
Yeah, I mow because I just don't have a lot of other talent. I can't build decks and things like that. So I wish I did, but I don't. So I mow because that's easy.
You guys have turf for your field, or is it natural?
We don't. It's natural. And
how are you guys handling when you get started during the spring?
Coach Loomis is our head coach. He's also the head of the district maintenance. So he does a lot of the mowing and stuff. So he gets to take care of our baseball field too. And not I say get to because he truly enjoys it. We would like to have turf because I think sometimes that puts us at a disadvantage because when we're inside in the gym, other teams are out on the turf practice, and then we can't get that full live look. But uh, he does a great job in keeping the field up, and it's one of the nicer, if not the nicest, high school natural fields in the state. It's beautiful. I'll have to maybe send you a picture of it. We had a drone up last year. It's quite a sight, but we would definitely love to have some turf so we didn't have to miss so much practice in the spring when it's raining every other day.
Do you guys are you allowed to use real baseballs inside?
We play catch with them, but when we're taking ground balls and things, we use. I got some right here. These little soft things here that won't break somebody's face if it hits them. But that's what we use when we're talking about field and fundamentals.
Yeah, I mean, how do you guys adjust to that? Those of us that have worked in colder weather climates, we've had to get used to being inside. And what are some other things that you're doing inside with them to try to keep them acclimated to being outside?
Mainly we hit in the cage. We do rotate. We do stations. A lot of bunting, a lot of bunt work. Coach is a big believer in laying down bunts. If we won a lot of games this past couple of years, and our ability to bunt and our ability to field bunt. So we work on both of those things: bunt defense, bunting, and just some hitting stations. A lot of hitting, a lot of bunting, a lot of just fundamental. We get the outfielders and the infield separated and just work on your footwork approaching a ground ball, footwork, turning, opening your hips and on fly balls, things like that. But try to focus on all the little things. That way, when we get onto the field, we can start bringing the team together, and we don't have to worry so much about introducing the small things.
How are you setting your bunting stations up?
We just rotate and we
Use
put them in
machines?
groups. No, we usually use live pitching. It's we don't throw it in very hard, but we either get one of our POs to do it or an assistant coach, and we go through and we obviously we direct them to where we want it, whether it's down the first base, third base line, or whether drag or but yeah, coach is very high on that. Sometimes
It's a
they look
lost
at it like,
art.
man, we're doing bunting again. We're like, oh, it's gonna pay off, guys.
Wins
It's gonna pay
games.
off.
You guys have set hitting stations, or you rotate hitting stations around? You have pretty much the same hitting stations.
We put them in team. We put them in groups, like group one, group two, and then we rotate based on if coach thinks we need 15 minutes. We rotate that way. If it's something he wants to get through a little faster, we may put a less time limit on it. And sometimes it's based on the team that's in the cage because they usually take a little. If we're going three, if there's five hitters and we're going three times through with six pitches, sometimes it takes them a little longer. So we'll go on there when they're done. Then we rotate.
What do you feel like makes a great assistant coach?
Loyalty for one. That goes with any sport. I learned that early on, and there's coaches you don't always agree, but I think that's the main one is loyalty. But also just helping out with the communicative process with players because sometimes the coach is worried about five pitches down the road, and sometimes the kids in the dugout need to have something said to them or taught to them. So I guess those are two things: just be an extension of his thoughts and but mainly loyalty. And I think that's probably something that's said a lot, but these days people will say that's big but then turn around and do the other thing. But coach and I think he knows I shoot him straight. Sometimes he looks at me and goes, man, well, thanks for your honesty, but and he knows though it's not going to offend me if I make a suggestion, he shoots it down. That's part of it. But he knows I have his back.
Yeah, I mean, what are some keys to handling coaching staff conflicts? It's going to happen. Every staff you're going to have conflicts. What are some keys to handling the conflicts?
Well, just not getting too emotional about it. I think one thing about us is we've been friends for quite a while. I knew him before I started coaching with him. I knew kind of what he was all about. We agree on our coaching philosophies quite a bit. So, and I tell him like, hey, he knows I'm very open. Sometimes people might say I'm a little too open, honest, but
I don't think you can be too honest.
I'm about getting things out on the table, and he learned that real quickly about me, and I think he appreciates that. I do. I think he appreciates the fact that I'm going to shoot him straight. But I don't. I think we don't let it get to us emotionally when we disagree. We're not in there screaming at each other, fighting like you see some coaches doing. That never happens between us. So never has happened between us. But we have had our disagreements. But we both handle it like adults and move on.
I mean, what do you feel like your why is, your coaching philosophy?
Just getting to know the kids. It's something I have on my LinkedIn right now, and it's something I've always lived by. Is they don't care what you know till they care, or till they know how much you care. We're really big on getting to know them outside the season, and I think that's means more to the kids than anything we know or teach them X's and O's wise.
They
Those
don't
kids,
have as much of that anymore. They
yeah,
need
and
more of
I
it.
know it's hard for some coaches, especially for, like I said
They don't
earlier, if
have a
you're
ton of
coaching
adult
multiple
role
sports.
models anymore.
Right. And I think that's a big reason why we have had some of the success we've had. I'm not trying to, I know we don't know more than a lot of other baseball coaches. There's a lot of great coaches out there, but I do think that we do a great job of letting our kids know that we care about them outside of baseball. We talk to them in the hallways. We do the coffee thing with them. We even have, I don't like it so much, but if we have one F on our team, number one, they don't play, but number two, sometimes we will call 6:30 a.m. study halls and the whole team comes. If one kid has an F, well, we don't throw that kid under the bus. We don't tell them who it is, but um, that's another thing that I think the kids appreciate. They don't always like getting up at 6:30, but I think they know, and I think their parents understand that we care about more than just their baseball abilities.
Have you always had that? I mean, communicating with your players, have you always had that along the way with your coaching journey?
I think so because I've taught that. I've been fortunate enough to work around some good coaches, and um, thinking back to when I was younger, I probably was a little over the top at times as far as my intensity levels, but I think I've always done a pretty good job of communicating and grown into that area of learning how to keep my emotions a little bit more under check too.
Is
I
that
was
one of
more
the biggest
sensitive.
things you kind of changed your mind on? I think you just grow out of that as you get older. I think you
Well,
kind of grow out of that.
it's one thing I learned from Coach Loomis. Like I said, I did a lot of football and basketball previously early in my career, and it was intensity was good. It was good. The kids you had when you call a timeout, sometimes it was good to get in them a little bit and motivate them. But baseball's a different game,
Play way
and that's
more
one thing I
games.
learned. Yeah, I learned from Coach Loomis is that hey, you just got to stay here. You can't get too down. You can't get too high, and he's done a good job of helping me learn that as far as baseball. You got to keep your head in the ball game because one error can turn into three or four if you're not careful. So yeah, I've learned a lot. So
What are some tips for some youth coaches listening in right now?
let them have fun is I think number one. Let them have fun. Don't overcoach them at that young age. It's crazy sometimes when you go to watch a youth game. The what I was just talking about, some of the intensity you see on the baseball field, and I think it goes a little far at times. Don't get me wrong, a lot of great youth coaches out there,
Save that
and
for practice, by the way. I
yeah,
mean, again, it's you can take that coaching and some of that and take that into practice, but when it's time for them to play, let them go play.
yeah, a good way to get a kid to really disinterested in your sport is to embarrass them in
Yes.
front of everybody. And I've seen kids quit playing the game because they've told us like if dad, mom, aunt, uncle, whoever just embarrassed them, and that's a shame because it's a great sport, and I think baseball can teach you a lot about life just in how it takes a lot of mental toughness and it tests you individually, and
And we
so
have
I'd
some
say that's the
great
main thing.
example. We have some great examples across the country of coaches that are doing it right. We need to continue to educate parents and coaches on this, but we do have a lot of really good youth coaches in that space
Yeah.
that are doing it right. And look at what USA Baseball's done here this summer. I mean, we are moving in the right direction. We just got to pull more people up with us on how to actually coach kids.
Yeah, and I think that's a good move that we did 3 or 4 years ago in kind of releasing our kids during the summer.
Yeah.
We encourage them to go find teams to play on, and they know who some of the teams in the area are that coach wants them to be on. I think it's the best things we've ever done is we released them to go get coached by some other people.
Yeah, and they
And
need you got to hear a different voice sometimes. Same thing with every team, bringing outside people in. They just need to hear a different voice sometimes.
and you know what? It's a lot more fun when we go watch them play and we can sit in the stands and watch them and cheer for them and not be their coach all the time. And I think that has benefited our program.
Do you guys have a feeder program? I mean, do you have youth feeder programs coming in for baseball?
We do not. I mean, we have a local team that is coached by some individuals that I guess you could say that was a feeder program because they all end up coming here to high school, and they do a very good job with the youth and teaching them fundamentals. But no, not a feeder program per se.
I think that's a common theme when you look around the country at the good high school programs around the country is they have some sort of feeder program set up that have good coaches at the lower levels that are going to feed. Obviously, it works from the ground up with that, but that's a common theme all over the country with our better high school programs.
We've been fortunate that we don't have anyone designated, but the two teams I can think of here in the recent last 4 or 5 years, they're very open to us and coach and they like to teach the same things that we're teaching, and they are very they're not like, this is my program, I'm going to run it my way. But coach is the same way. He's not going down there and say, hey, we need this, we need this, we need, as long as they're letting them have fun and teaching the basic fundamentals. That's the main thing.
What are your on-field responsibilities?
I'm first base coach, and then I coach outfielders. I used to work with the infielders a little bit, but coach likes to work with the catchers and the pitchers, and so I work with the outfielders. And he's the guy at third base waving them home, and I'm the guy trying to get them there. So,
Do you have
trying not to
favorite
get
outfield drills? And do you have any favorite outfield drills?
we don't do anything any different than probably what most people do. We work a lot on coming in, approaching the ball, attacking the ball, chopping your feet, opening your hips, but reverse outs, things like that. Just your typical outfield drills. We don't do anything real special. We just really hammer those 3 or 4 things really hard.
You work pro step or traditional step when they're fielding?
Um, we do pro step.
Do you? Is that for
Yeah,
everybody?
yeah. Well, I can say what we do that, but now that I think about it, coaches, we've kind of gotten to the point where,
For me, it's an individual thing.
yeah, it's whatever you're comfortable with.
I think it has more to do with how tall they are too. That was the thing. I think your shorter kids can use a more traditional fielding in the outfield, and then your bigger kids, I think the pro step works easier for them because they can balance getting down a little bit easier. So I think it's more of an individualized fielding position, depending on size and
Yeah, and
comfort.
it's one of those things that we've kind of gone a little bit away from, like,
Yeah.
because we had a couple outfielders this past year that they were just natural at what they. You don't want to change that. You don't want to mess with that. So it
And
is
dominant
more
foot.
individual.
I think about this sometimes with like prep steps for infielders, outfield, because I played both along the way, but my left foot was my dominant foot. I played soccer, so I always played on the left side. My left foot was my dominant foot. So if I played the outfield, I was much more comfortable in a traditional fielding position because my left foot was my dominant foot.
That makes sense. Yeah,
But
well,
those are all the questions you ask along the way. It's like, okay, it can't be, it can't cookie cut. You can't be black and white. There's a lot of nuances to all of this.
I can tell you with coach's philosophy is he has very few absolutes. His absolutes are the lead you take at first base. He wants you to do it the same way every time. You're going to learn how to bunt, and you're going to learn how to throw and catch. the right way. Other than that, he tells them, like, if there's something you've learned with another program or another coach that works for you and it doesn't go against my absolutes, I'm fine with it. And it's worked well for us.
So you guys are
Like I
out there
said,
when they're playing catch during practice. You guys are out there with them.
yeah, we do every day. We take quite a few, I'd say close to 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes playing catch and doing some fielding drills. And he tells them, he reinforces it every day. Sometimes if it's a little loose and some balls are hitting the fence and getting over, we'll stop and we'll get some conditioning in to make them refocus. But he tells them, like, guys, if you can't throw and catch, you can't win baseball. I don't care how well you hit. If you can't throw and catch, you're not going to win baseball games. And we tell them it's the most important part of practice every day is at that first 30 minutes. So,
You guys have many dual pitcher position players?
yeah, we do. We're small enough that we pretty much have. Now we play a lot of teams that you look over there and they got guys in the bullpen and we're like, wow, that'd be a neat luxury to have. But
I don't know. I love two-way
um,
players.
most of our guys are two-way players. We did have a couple POs this past year.
I
Yeah,
think
but
it forces you to be way more creative as a coach if you have to coach guys that can do both. I think
oh,
you have to be way more creative as a coach.
it absolutely does, especially when you get to regionals and state and it's one and done. I mean, you like uh, you get to state, like McPherson, for example, we met in the state championship game, they were the 1 seed and they played the 8 seed, and they got such a big lead in that first game that they were able to pull their one out after, I don't know, 20 some pitches. So they were able to have him, saved him for the state championship game. Well, we had to burn our one and our two, and so that was a luxury that they had where we didn't. But credit to them. But some of those 5 and 6A teams, classification teams, bigger schools that we play, yeah, we're we're like, okay, how are we going to piece this together? And we look over there, and they've got three guys warming up in the bullpen. That's it's a little tough sometimes, but
It's always interesting to see how coaches have navigated the pitch count rules. But I mean, it's been better. I mean, from the outside looking in, I think it's been better. I don't know how you guys are feeling about the pitch count rules.
well, yeah, it definitely holds coaches accountable. I think most coaches have the best interest of players in mind. I do think maybe sometimes the pitch counts are a little stringent, but I also understand why they do it.
It's almost
Um,
like you should graduate. That's something to think about. It's almost like a graduation as the year goes on, where you should be much stricter in the beginning of the year,
yeah,
but then as players get acclimated, can you extend them a little bit? But you would have to shrink it back to start. But then can you add 5 pitches on per week as they go once they get acclimated? Because if you can keep them from getting hurt early in the year, once they get acclimated, that's usually it's full go for guys.
yeah, and unless they're showing some signs of soreness or in the wrong areas, if their elbow, we coach always tells them that shoulder soreness, that's gonna happen. Fight through it. But we always tell them to kind of pay attention to your elbow, and if that's hurting, then we need to get it looked at. But yeah, I think you're right. It's if a kid's late in the season and they're 102 pitches in and they're not showing fatigue or you know, I I went when I was in high school. Of course we didn't have the knowledge base, but I remember throwing 120, 130 pitches and then doing it again 4 days later. And luckily, I've never had any arm problems, but I know not everybody's the same. But I'd like to see the pitch count increased by 5 to 10 pitches. I think that would help a bunch, but that's just my personal opinion.
Do you have a fail forward moment? Do you have something that you thought was going to sidetrack you, but looking back now was one of the best things that happened to you?
As far as in my career or this
Anything,
past season,
personal, professional?
well, yeah, when I got out of education back, it was been about 2006-ish, 7-ish. It was kind of a rough spot in my life. I was going through a divorce and had little kids at home that I was missing. Quite frankly, I was missed being around my children, and I was actually in the FedEx business. And yeah, that definitely was a time I was kind of wondering what am I doing here. But luckily, I had people in my life that knew me that recruited me back into education. So I got to give the credit to them because I don't know if I'd be here if they didn't come to me and say, "Hey, how about how about getting back into teaching? So
Love it. Love it. That's good that you have somebody in your corner that can nudge you in that direction, because we don't always have people like that are willing to be honest with us and obviously cultivate people's true passions.
yeah, I'm lucky. I'm definitely lucky in that regard. I work with a lot of great people here. We've got a group of friends that we do a lot of things outside the building and going out to eat, and our wives get together and we do cookouts and things like that. So I'm in a good place here in Tonganoxie, and I would be remiss if I didn't throw out our parents and our administrative staff here were a great big part of our success the
You guys
last
have a
couple of
booster
years.
club?
We do, we do, but our administration trusts us to go to take kids to tournaments early in the year and stay overnight. They trust us that our kids are gonna behave and do the right thing. But I tell you what, our parent support in almost 30 years of coaching have never seen the kind of support that we've got in the last couple of years from our parents.
Makes a huge difference.
I mean, we told them that at the banquet at the end of the year, and I don't know if they thought we were just saying it to be nice, but it's the truth. They were there for everything we needed. Didn't have any issues. It's just amazing. I've never seen anything like it. It was awesome. I mean, it just made everything that happened towards the end of the year that much better because everybody was pulling
It's a
together.
community. It's
Yeah,
community.
and I
Makes
and I honestly had never experienced that before, so it was a good way for me to go out, I guess.
You have any evening or morning routines you do every day that you like?
Coffee, coffee in the morning, and I'll tell you, I like to play video games on my phone.
Love it.
So if I get home, I like
That's
to
a
sit in the
first.
chair
We
and
haven't
relax.
had that yet. That's a first. Which
Uh,
games? Which games are you banging on the phone?
gosh, one of them's baseball, 2019. I can't remember the exact name of it. I do that, and then it's like Bubble Pop or something. I don't even know the name of it, but I used to be a Candy Crush guy, but I got worn out on that one. So,
See,
but I do like to
that's why
play
you're
some video.
lenient on the phones with your guys, because you're on it too.
Yeah, I try to keep it hidden during class most of the time, but then I also just I like working in my yard. Like I like to mow. I like to work in the yard, keep the yard look nice. So
You got any favorite books?
not really. I'm not much of a reader, to be honest with you. The last book I read was The Art of Scouting. He was a scout for the Kansas City Royals. He just passed away. Art, I can't remember his last name, but that was a great book. He used to be a scout for the Yankees and then came to the Royals, and that's the last book I read about a year and a half ago. So yeah, I'm not much of
What
a
are
book
some
guy.
coaching resources that you enjoyed? I mean, you multi-sport coach. What
I,
were
I look at the
Was it
ABCA.
clinics? Was it books? Was it what resources kind of helped you along the
I
way?
use the I use the internet quite a bit. Go on there and I look for some philosophies, some quotes, some drills, things like that. But I also always the ABCA publication. I look at it, but mostly the internet is what I go to. There's sometimes it's college websites. I know Coach Loomis. I don't know if you've ever met Coach Loomis, our head coach, but he listens to you like religiously. When I
Tell him
told him I
thank
was
you,
going,
Coach Loomis.
when
I
I
appreciate you. If you're listening in, Coach Loomis, I appreciate it. It does
when
mean a
I
lot. I get it's so gratifying when people reach out or say that they listen, because I.
well, I'm going to start listening now. I wasn't really aware. I'm not big. I'm not a big social media guy, so I don't.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware. But when I told him I was going on your show, he was like, "No kidding!" Like, "Oh, I listen to him all the time."
love
So
it. No, it is. You feel like you're giving back in your own small way. You feel like you're giving back to the baseball community, and that's it's just gratifying when people say things like that.
well, it's
I'm
cool to
like
have
you.
some.
I don't take compliments well. I think I'm
Yeah.
extremely hard on myself at times, but I don't take compliments well. It's just kind of the way I was raised.
Me too. That's why they called me in the office when they presented me this award. I guess the principal wanted to do something in front of the entire student body, and I think Coach Loomis said, "I don't know if he'll like that very much." And I'm glad they didn't do that. I don't know. It's just like I said, it's the way I was raised, and maybe I should just let go and enjoy things like that a little more. But it just
Well,
I
you got
don't
to
know.
savor it. This is something that you have to savor because it doesn't hardly ever happen. So when things like this happen, you do have to step back and savor those moments because they just don't happen very often.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably the best individual thing that's ever happened. Obviously, there's team times that were very exciting that I look back, but individually, I'd say this is probably my best moment is having something like this because a lot of times in coaching, it's not very well appreciated by you don't feel
Especially as an
very well
assistant,
appreciated sometimes.
especially
Feel
as
kind
an
of under the
assistant
gun a
coach.
lot. And you wonder sometimes if there are people noticing, that we're trying to do the right things. And so, yeah, it definitely was a humbling experience, but it was a great deal, great day.
What are some final thoughts or something I should have asked you that I didn't?
I really can't think of anything. I really didn't know what you were going to ask me.
Ah,
I didn't really
I
have any
get this a
preconceived
lot.
notions.
People will ask for questions. I want this to be a very organic conversation, and sometimes, I have a list of questions, but we don't always get to them. And I want the conversation to kind of go wherever it takes us, and so that's why I don't send questions out to people because I don't want their answers to be programmed.
Right.
So that's why I don't send out questions.
And I
But
kind of assumed that.
yeah.
My wife even asked me last night. She says, "Well, what are you guys going to talk about?" And I said, "I have no idea. I assume we're going to talk some baseball, but I don't."
Yes, for
And
sure.
I figured that's
For
you
sure.
probably didn't want a robot coming on your show. So,
Yeah. Well, Brad, I really appreciate it. I have a lot of respect for you because I have friends and family that were in special education. And I know how hard that job is. So I really do appreciate the fact that you love that and that's calling for you.
well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you having me on. It's been a good experience for me.
All right, sir. All right. Have a great rest of your week.
Okay, take care, Ryan.